But when we have this sense of spaciousness, well, I should say, sense of space, which is spaciousness, then this helps us to have a perspective, a different perspective on what's going on and so forth. And it's really important. But of course, this spaciousness, it gives us the opportunity of identifying with what I call conscious presence. And whilst we're lost in our emotions, whilst we're lost in our thinking, whilst we're lost even in our life's dramas, then we miss the most obvious fact, which is that we are actually conscious presence. Behind everything that we do and think and feel, there is this conscious presence, call it awareness if you want, and it's right there now. It's right. And remember, there's a mix in these 112 practices. There is a mix. Some of them are formal practices, which most of you are quite happy with. You do your practice in the morning or whenever. Some of them are to be applied in daily life. And there's some also that I've to apply it more in daily life, trying to be spacious, when we're washing the dishes or when we're walking, when we've got our cat on our lap, or we're walking the dog. In these kind of situations, we can bring these same kind of practices into our lives. They're not specifically given in the Vigyana Bhairava, but the Vigyana Bhairava gives us a pointer as to how we can apply its teachings in our life. That's the second type. And the third type, of course, are the more philosophical, reflective types, which belong to Jnana Yoga and Advaita, where we ask questions in a state of receptivity so that we can get a realization of the meaning or the answer behind the question. When I was in India, I must say I was looking for something which was out of the ordinary. And yes, life was out of the ordinary, that's for sure. But what is fundamental, it's not ordinary, it's incredible, but it's right here now. It's just. Please, can you say a few words about how awareness and conscious presence fit in with the koshas, and specifically how they relate to the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Anandamaya kosha? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We haven't brought in the concepts of the koshas yet. They're not mentioned in the text. The main kosha that's mentioned in the text, of course, refers throughout. That's the pranamaya kosha, the energy body. But the other ones are not specifically mentioned. I'm a great fan, if that's the right word, of the kosha system, the pancha kosha system. I think it's a fantastic concept of what we are and how we function. And I would say the conscious presence or awareness acts, of course it has to, it acts at all those different levels, and it's trying to become more conscious of the different levels as we develop our sensitivity. So bringing conscious presence into our physicality seems to be easy, but I think most of us are not as conscious of our body and its foibles and how it functions as maybe we would like to be. Through Hatha Yoga, hopefully we do become more conscious of our physicality. That's the Annamaya kosha, of course. The Pranamaya kosha, I mean, most of the practices in the Vigyana Bhairava Tantra, they are about developing awareness of the Pranamaya kosha, the etheric body, energy body, as a means to open up to a wider sphere of our personality, represented by the other koshas, and also opening up to realizing our fundamental conscious nature. The The third one, of course, the Manomaya Kosha. Yeah, most of the practices that we do in yoga, whether it's Vigyana Bhairava or what, we're trying to see the mind, let the thoughts bubble up, and become more conscious, more aware of what is taking place in the individual mind. So it's very much there too. The Jnanamaya Kosha, this is the intuitive level, the wider sphere of activity where we can tap into telepathy or clairaudience or these kind of capacities. So yeah, the awareness can be there. Everyone here has had moments of intuition. And when you have those moments of intuition, it's quite a magical time, actually. It's like a shock. I don't know what your experience is, but this is my experience. When you realize something, you have an intuition about something. Of course, if it's not a negative one, that's something different. We can have negative intuitions, but generally it's a shock. It's a kind of it's a visitor we didn't expect. And when we have these visitors we don't expect, it kind of puts us into this very wakeful state. And therefore, it helps us to, I think, in that moment, in Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about bardo states. And I think in the Vigyana Bhairava too, they don't mention bardo, of course, but it's a way of just finding those points in our experience which pull us out of our slumber. I mean, in the Vigyana Bhairava practices, they even give practices where people are on the battlefield. Now, I don't want to be on the battlefield, and I don't think you want to be on the battlefield either. But trying to be conscious even in dire situations of fear. And it's true. I've experienced fear many times. I've had many close encounters with death. And there are moments when you kind of go into this bardo state and it shakes us out of our habitual thinking. And then it is possible for there to be an identification with conscious presence. So that's the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And the Anandamaya Kosha, the causal body, the bindu, the point. This is actually the sluice gate where consciousness, this is not exactly how it is actually. I mean, I think every concept here is a failure. I mean, fantastic concepts, but they fail to give the true picture. But the bindu, the Anandamaya Kosha, it's full of bliss. Yes, of course, it's full of joy because it's there that we consciously identify with conscious presence. And that's why it's full of joy. It's the Anandamaya Kosha, the envelope which is full of bliss or joy or whatever. So there, at that point, there is, in a sense, there is this automatic identification where consciousness is identified with itself. You know, the bindu is the sluice gate. It's not, we're not aware of anything. We are identified with what we are. So this is the Anandamaya Kosha. So in answer to the question, yeah, it applies on all the different kosha levels, obviously, because it's the basis of all these different spheres of our being. Is the space consciousness? No. This is the question here. It's kind of as I explained earlier on, it's the stepping stone in a sense. It's like consciousness goes into space and out of space comes everything. You know, as I've said many times, you look at the universe, the prime thing that we can understand materially is space. Everything is in space. Where it came from, if you believe in the Big Bang, what did the Big Bang take place in? It can't take place in space, because at the Big Bang there was no space, there was no time. So it's a difficult thing to get our heads into. But space is the vessel in the creation, the universe has been created. Space seems to be the vessel in which you have the galaxies, the planets and the suns, and ourselves also. We are in space, but it's more complex than that, because as I explained earlier on, space isn't just out there. Space is on another level also, with the intra-atomic space within atoms, and the inter-atomic space, the space between atoms. So space is the vessel. How it comes about, I mean, how time and space come out, I mean, that is one of the mysteries, but the simplistic explanation is it comes out of this bedrock of existence, which is consciousness. So space is not consciousness in itself, but space is the medium through which consciousness expresses itself. So consciousness expresses through space, and that's in our individuality also. At each of these chakra levels, or at each of these kosha levels, I would say, it expresses through this sense of space to create the multifaried aspects of our personality. I mean, we're very complex beings, but we're complex beings because we have access to that enormous field of potential. So yes, in a sense, we do create the world around us through our concept. I don't think we create it, and I'm open to this, to being proved wrong. I think there is a universe, of course, I mean, it's here, and it is one universe, it's a projection of consciousness. But what happens is, because of our conditioning, we buy in to a different interpretation of it, more or less. More or less, we still see the same thing. We still see the moon in the sky. We see trees and flowers and so forth. That's of course true. But nevertheless, the meaning we imbue on things is very much determined on our mental structure. So in answer to that question, I think the universe is as it is, but our vision of it, because of our brain, say if we were a monkey or something, we would see something different. If we were a bat, we would see something different. But our interpretation of the universe is determined by the structure of our mind. That's what I think. And therefore, the Vigyana Bhairava is trying to take us back to a fundamental identification, not with the mind, not specifically. It's trying to take us back to an identification with awareness of conscious presence.